morning, everyone. They say Suzuki Roshi used to greet people when they would come into the Zendo saying, "Good morning, Bodhisattvas." So good morning, Bodhisattvas. What a delight to be here together today with all of you. I'm Chris Fortin. Welcome to our little Dharma Heart Zen Zendo. It's an honor and a privilege to have all of you here and to have Rafe with us today. I was looking at your biography this morning and was well humbled. I'm glad I met you yesterday and just delighted in your presence. I may not get this right, but little taste is Rafe started at the Rochester Zen Center with Roshi Philip Kaplow, which I think is where he and Erica of our Sangha met. Deep, deep roots. Then studied and practiced with Robert Aiken, and then was fully ordained as a lay teacher and a Dharma teacher by Don and Henry Roshi. You founded Endless Path Zendo. We also, I see, have Vermont Zen Center here, and wherever you're all from, it's one of the sweetnesses of this Zoom time is that we can all just land here together. Makes me trust and entrust ourselves to endless time and space. That our practice includes and covers everything. So what a joy to be here together. Rafe is also, I don't mean to embarrass you, but an award-winning author and storyteller. His books, Before Buddha Was Buddha and Endless Path and The Hungry Tigress, have been informing our practice here the last couple of months, at least, I think, at least overtly. The Jataka tales. I wouldn't have found them without Rafe. They wouldn't have been able to come so alive in this time. I'm deeply grateful. I think we all are. They feel like tales for our time. It's so easy to feel helpless or hopeless or overwhelmed. And if quails and crows and tree spirits and the whole world is singing the Dharma across time and space, I don't have any doubt that that's what we're doing and that we can encourage each other to do this. And that makes me really, really happy and a sense of great joy. So Rafe is going to offer incense to the Buddha. Thank the Buddha for all of us. Thank you for that. And then we'll do the before lecture chant. Ours may be a little different than what you do. I just say, it's just my way, is if you don't know the words, just hum along. Whatever's in your heart is the truth of it. And then Rafe can please take it away. An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to to remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. And you'll have to unmute yourself, Rafe.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's really a pleasure to be here. And thank Erica for connecting us. That was really a lovely surprise, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. And, you know, the Jatakas for me have been very important for many, many years. Going back to, I guess, you know, when we first started practicing, Rose and I, we already had a child. So we were always looking for stories. And eventually that opened up into really seeing how the Jatakas connect with Zen practice for all of us, including adults, obviously. So I'd like to share with you this morning a somewhat unusual Jataka. It's the Ghana Tindu Jataka, which is number 520 in the Pali collection of 547 such past life tales of the Buddha. So let's just jump right into it. Once the Buddha, as a Bodhisattva in the very distant past, came to life as the divinity of a Tinduka tree that grew just outside the walls of a great city. The king of that realm was named Pankala. He lived in that city and he ruled in such luxury that heavy taxation was needed to support it. But every year, following ancient custom, the king would go to the Tinduka tree, make an offering, and ask the tree for its support and protection. Now, the Bodhisattva, who is the divinity, we might say the consciousness of the tree, thought, the king honors me. He seeks my protection. Yet his kingdom is in danger and he doesn't see it. I must protect him and his realm. Though he respects no one, he will listen to me. I alone can do it. So that night, the Tinduka tree Bodhisattva appeared in the king's sleeping chamber. And the king awoke, and obviously he was in shock. He was terrified. There was a great and shining apparition hovering at his bedside. Who are you? He stammered. And the Bodhisattva answered, I'm the consciousness, the divinity of the Tinduka tree. Hold on one second. For some reason, hold on. We'll see if we can get the my screen to open it up. For some reason, Word seems to be blocked. I've never had that happen before when Zoom is on. So give me a minute. I thought I had a nice talk written with words I really liked, and I may have to wing the whole thing. That would be odd. Let's see what I can do about it. I can't explain this. I've never seen it happen before. Word seems completely dead. Let's see if we can do anything about it. Give me 1 second here. Let's see if we can shift something around. Wow, bizarre. All right, let's see if that does anything. Yes, okay. Said, I'm the divinity of the Tinduka tree, your tree. Be at peace. I have come out of compassion for you. Now, while you live in luxury, your kingdom falls into ruin. And then he recited these verses. Vigilance is the path of life. Carelessness leads to death. Soon your realm will be given to robbers. No sons will inherit your treasure. There is still time to regain the true path. Ruling well, true riches will increase. Great King, it is not too late. Open your eyes and ears and learn what your people say. Having spoken, the Bodhisattva tree deity vanished in a great blaze of green and golden light. The next morning, the king put on the clothes of an ordinary man, gave the kingdom into the care of his ministers, and accompanied by his advisor, the chaplain, he left the city, determined to uncover the truth or falsity of the Tinduka tree's words for himself. They came to a village, and there they saw people piling thorn branches around their houses, then heading off into the forest. When the king's taxmen arrived, they found the village deserted and soon left. When evening came, robbers tried to break into the houses, but the thorns stopped them, and so they left too. Later that night, the villagers returned, and as they cleared away the thorn branches, one of them cried out in pain. A large thorn had pierced his foot. Sitting down and drawing out the thorn, inspired by the tree Bodhisattva, he cursed the king in verse. May the king be pierced by an arrow in some fray, as I've been pierced by this thorn today. The chaplain said, why blame the king? You stepped on the thorn, so you are to blame. Inspired by the tree Bodhisattva, the man answered, it's because of the king that I'm in pain. Defenseless folk by oppressors are slain. At night, thieves prey on us, and it's tax collectors by day. Vicious folk run the realm when evil kings bear sway. Distressed by fear, to the forest we flee and pile thorns round our homes for security. The king said, my greed sent the tax collectors. Hiding from them, the people use thorns to protect their homes from robbers. Without my greed, the man's foot would not have been pierced. I've been warned. I must rule righteously, or disaster will strike. Let us return to the capital and set things right. But the tree Bodhisattva inspired the chaplain to say, great king, it may be so, or it may not. Let's not be hasty. And so they walked on. In another village, they saw a woman struggling to carry a big load of firewood. Though she had 2 grown daughters, she would not allow them into the forest to help her without husbands to protect them. Now, under the weight of her load, she fell in pain. Inspired by the tree Bodhisattva, she cursed the king. When will this selfish king die? For unwed daughters' sakes, I cry. As long as he reigns, they must sigh for children and husbands in vain. The chaplain said, foolish words. The king is not a matchmaker. But inspired by the tree Bodhisattva, the woman said, at night we're prey to thieves, then it's greedy men by day. Bad people run the show when evil kings hold sway. In such times, how can poor girls hope to wed? Our lot will not improve until this king is dead. The king thought, she's not wrong. My people suffer, and the things I do are at root. The tree divinity has a point. Going on, they saw a plowman whose ox, struck by the plow, lay wounded. And the plowman too cursed the king. May King Pankala, though with armor girt, be speared through by some foe, like my ox who sorely hurt has fallen and lies low. The priest chaplain exclaimed, how can you blame the king? You struck the ox with your own plow. Your own carelessness, not the king's, is at root. Inspired by the tree Bodhisattva, the plowman said, I'm angry with the king, and rightly so, I claim. When defenseless folk are by oppressors slain, by night 3 thieves prey on us. By day it's the king's own men. They stole my lunch to get more food. My wife had to run. While I worked on hungry and faint, I slipped, and so my ox's leg was ripped. What I do and what I don't do, said the king, harms my subjects, people and animals alike. My choices lie at the root. The king and his chaplain headed for home. On the way, they stopped at another village for the night. In the morning, a man tried to milk a wild buffalo cow and was trampled in agony. He cursed the king with words inspired by the tree, Bodhisattva. May the king fall in some fray, as I'm laid low because of him today. The chaplain said, how is your injury the king's fault? You were trampled by a buffalo, not by the king. Inspired by the Bodhisattva, the man answered, the king's to blame, for in his reign, defenseless folk are by oppressors slain. By night it's thieves, by day the king's own men harass us sore. They took my cow, while demands for milk grow more. So a buffalo cow I tried to milk today and got badly hurt. So my curse I'll say. The king hung his head and said, there is a connection. He and the chaplain walked on. In the next village, they saw a cow wandering the streets, bawling and lamenting, unwilling to eat, drink, or be comforted. Asking why, they were told that a tax collector had slaughtered the cow's little dappled calf to make himself a pretty sword sheath from its skin. Now even the callous village boys were moved by the cow's grief, and they cursed the king, guided to poetry by the tree Bodhisattva. Let King Pankala pine and his children weep in vain, like this poor cow whose calf his men have slain. The chaplain said, why blame the king? The boys said, his blame is plain when defenseless beings are by oppressors slain. By night we're prey to thieves, and it's the king's men by day. Brutal folk are given license when evil kings hold sway. The king said, it's true. There was no call for such brutality. Nearing the capital, they passed a dry water tank where crows were stabbing frogs with their beaks and eating them. Then the Bodhisattva, through the power of his great compassion, cursed the king from the mouth of a frog. So may the king in fight be beaten, his sons and all, as we woodland frogs to the village crows now fall. The chaplain said, kings can't guard every creature. Crows eat frogs. This is only natural. Surely this can't be blamed on the king. But the frog, moved by the Bodhisattva, said, your words are flattering and will deceive the king. If blessed with prosperity, this realm would peaceful be. Village birds like the crows good offerings would then enjoy and have no need our lives to destroy. The king said, all creatures, even down to the frogs in the water tanks, suffer because of me. In the slime at the bottom of it all lies my own mind. Following where self-centeredness led, I lost the way. The tree divinity was right. I must change my life and bring benefit, even down to the frogs in the water tanks. When he returned to the city, this is what he did. In time, the realm prospered. After telling this Jataka, the Buddha said, a leader must forsake evil courses and rule for the benefit of all. If he does, or she, he will prosper and the realm benefit. At that time, I was the divinity of the Tinduka tree. Now, let's look at this from the perspective of Zen practice. It's an interesting little story. Usually the Bodhisattva appears as a human being, as a god, as any sort of a human being, really, a robber, a farmer, a sage, a king, you can almost name anything. He's also appeared in some Jatakas as the child of an ogre. So if you think you have hard family connections, just think about being the child of an ogre. There's no obstacle to working on ourselves and maturing. But in this Jataka, he's a tree. So trees and the Buddha way naturally go together. The Buddha was born under flowering sala trees, realized perfect enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, entered parinirvana under twin sala trees. Trees were with him birth to death. In this Jataka, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha in a past life, is himself a tree, or what the Jataka calls the divinity of a tree. So I take this to mean the tree's consciousness, the consciousness of a tree. Now, the Jataka itself presents a fairly familiar story, which is that the state rots from the top down, and the suffering of self-centered leaders, that self-centered leaders cause, is pervasive and very real. So there's nothing surprising here except for the compassionate intervention of the Bodhisattva as the consciousness of a tree. Here's a 2,500-year-old tale that asks us to open to a very wide view, one that's not simply a matter of religious faith, which is that trees are alive. Now, forests, we now know, manifest a profoundly alert intelligence. Word has it these days that they form a kind of worldwide web of compassionate intercommunication. And I'm going to hold on a second. It seems pretty dark where I am. I'm going to open up a screen and let a little more light in so maybe you can see a little better. Hold on a second. Let's see if this makes things a little brighter. Do what we can. Anyway, is that a little brighter? Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay. So trees in forests, we're now beginning to realize form families. Older trees caring for younger relations by guiding nutrients their way. And it's even said that younger trees can care for aged tree relatives by doing the same thing, and in this way can even keep stumps alive for centuries. So trees are alive and are connected with one another. Plus, they shelter so many lives. Who's to say they're not intrinsically compassionate? Squirrels, bugs, birds, snakes, fungi, insects, grubs, all find shelter in trees. People shelter beneath their branches and gather fruit, nuts, bark, sap, for food and medicines. In India, trees have been loved and respected for providing shade from the killing heat. And drawing on this, an old Zen teacher said, "I want to be like a great shade tree, able to shelter all beings." Even in death, trees benefit others by decaying into pulp, adding nutrients to the soil, and while alive, they pump oxygen into the atmosphere. In fact, without plants and trees, there would be no life on this earth. Over countless millions of years, they quietly transformed a barren planet into a garden. And today they continue oxygenating the atmosphere, pulling heavy metals from the soil, pollutants from the air. They're also the only form of life, as far as I know, that does not need to kill to live. They photosynthesize their life energy directly from sunlight. So how's that for non-harming or ahimsa? Who's to say then, given all this, that trees don't, let's put it this way, that no compassionate aspiration lies beneath all this? When we see the activity of trees, how can we say that they're not intrinsically compassionate? So we might say bodhisattvas and trees pretty naturally go together. And how about this? This is a quote from Richard Powers' novel, The Overstory. I don't know if you know this, but here's this amazing quote. "You and the tree in your backyard come from a common ancestor. 1.5 billion years ago, the two of you parted ways. But even now, after an immense journey in separate directions, that tree and you still share a quarter of your genes." So the Talmud says that every blade of grass has its angel hovering over it, whispering, "Grow, grow." Here, the Bodhisattva, as the divinity of a medicinal tree, extends encouragement far beyond the needs of his own tree, as well as beyond the needs of his own species. More than that, he offers life-changing help, which is rather astonishing when you think about it. After all, trees are rooted in one spot and only mobile in a very limited extent on a very slow timescale. Root tips avoid obstacles and seek water. Leaves turn towards light. Chemical messages spread along root, leaf, and fungal networks, but so slowly compared to the nervy quickness of animals, we hardly notice it. So how can the consciousness of a tree, the divinity of a tree, as it appears in this Jataka, actively help anyone but other trees? What can a tree do for others besides offering or beyond offering fruit, sap, shade, oxygen, roots, leaves, and bark for teas and medicines, or by allowing bugs, rodents, fungi, snakes, birds, etc., to use it as a home? Now, in the Jataka, the Bodhisattva as a tree's consciousness demonstrates a wide-ranging awareness, and through that awareness, an ability to influence events at a distance. Is this mere fantasy, or does it touch on truth? When you think about it, trees actually could have such a mind. Though rooted in one spot, a tree is simultaneously woven through roots, leaves, and fungal webs into the entire living fabric of forest and city. Absorbed in the great web of life ringing the planet, a tree also extends endlessly upward, exchanging energy with sun, moon, and stars. What then are the limits of its body and consciousness? Wu Men, in his verse, the case number 20 of the gateless barrier, the Wumen Kwan, or Mumonkan in Japanese, says, "My body is so big, there's no place to put it. When the self-centered body and mind fall away, what size actually are we?" As the consciousness of an honored and ancient tree, the Bodhisattva uses this vast network of interwoven awareness to create a context in which wisdom and compassion can arise. His intervention, which starts off dramatically, becomes quietly skillful, and in the end saves an entire kingdom. And he does this as a tree. The Buddha, in telling this tale of one of his own past lives, then offers us a wonderful model for bodhisattvic action. Hardly drawing any attention to himself, he nonetheless quietly and skillfully does what's needed to help all beings. And isn't this what real teaching comes down to? Creating a space for the possibility of insight. Wisdom and compassion cannot be given to anyone. Each of us has to do the work needed to uncover our birthright. But the way to our original unconditioned nature of wisdom and compassion can be shown. Hence the Buddha's eightfold path of right or true living. Hence our own ongoing practice of Zazen, Samu, Sesshin, of koans, mondo, teisho, zazenkai, jukai, and doksan. This is how we uncover our birthright and how, like the king in this tale, we move from habitually childish self-centeredness to the way or a way of living that benefits all. The Bodhisattva helps align all beings with reality, their own reality, our own reality. And so helps end the endless sufferings arising from the delusion, the fantasy, really, of something called me in here and everyone and everything somewhere vaguely out there. The very delusion, which is now threatening life of all beings on this planet. The delusion which lies at the bottom of racism, misogyny, classism, and environmental irresponsibility. The thought, the felt experience arising from that thought of me, myself, and I, that we're simply separate and alone. It is a fantasy. And because of that fantasy, all beings suffer. Seeing through this is the essence of the path of the Bodhisattva, or wisdom being, as Bodhi means wisdom, and Sattva being. A Bodhisattva is literally a wisdom being. And what is that? What is it to be a wisdom being? Well, when you strip away all the lofty esoteric associations, it's simply the actions of someone. Doesn't even have to be a human being. Someone who's wise enough to choose to do the work needed to mature beyond their own habitual and false sense of self-centeredness. In short, a bodhisattva is a maturing or growing up being, and a Buddha is a fully grown up one. And these days, you might say that an environmental activist is a bodhisattva. So let's coin a new term for environmental activism, which is bodhisattva. So in this past life, the bodhisattva, through many lifetimes later, will be the Buddha Shakyamuni, starts off by intervening directly, saying, stop, don't do that, admonishing the startled and half-awakened king to put an end to the evil that has arisen. After that, he intercedes quietly, working behind the scenes to encourage the good that does not yet exist to come forth. In short, he aims to stop evil, do good, and save the many beings, fulfilling all three general resolutions of classical Buddhism. Effective loving kindness, the kind that does more than simply make ourselves feel good, requires skill. Fortunately, such skill develops over time. How? Is the result of trying and failing and getting up and trying again. Legend says that the great Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, tried to empty the countless hells, and that amazingly, after countless eons of effort, he actually did it. Only, to his shock and dismay, a minute later, after he had cleared out all the hells, he found out all the hells were again completely filled. His head burst into 11 heads. His arms burst into 1,000 arms. Rolling up his 1,000 sleeves, the Bodhisattva returned to the endless task, having the failure itself, having only brought forth even greater insight and skill. To lift another line from the gateless barrier, the failure was wonderful indeed. The failure was wonderful indeed. The Bodhisattva in our Jataka, having been through his own version of this cycle many times, has gained immense skill and can now actualize wisdom and compassion as a tree so deftly that even his silent presence makes ordinary folk burst into poetry and into song. It's so interesting that these ordinary people all speak in verse in this Jataka. It's like they burst, it's like a musical comedy. The presence, the mere presence, the invisible presence of the Bodhisattva has them all singing. That's kind of a wonderful image in itself. And as the wonderful 12th century ox herding pictures put it, withered trees he swiftly brings to bloom. The mere presence of the Bodhisattva. Withered trees he swiftly brings to bloom. Yet the king in our story never knows that a Bodhisattva's compassionately skillful activity lies beneath all his seemingly chance encounters. The king never knows that. And he never knows that the Bodhisattva, that is the Buddha to be himself, is the consciousness of his honored tree. All he knows is that a tree divinity, like some visionary burning bush, appeared at his bedside and ordered him to stop causing harm. I wonder how such a visitation would be received today. Would it fall into the realm of a close encounter? Would it be considered a prophetic dream? or seen as a hallucination. How can we be open to meaningful events that reside at the borders of dream when we have so little language in our own culture for deep imagination and so little cultural thought for the inner life of non-human beings? And yet this inner life is going on all around us and we disregard it. We hardly know it exists. I think reading and paying attention to the Jatakas can help sensitize us to all of this. This very missing territory in ourself, our sense of isolation, our sense of aloneness, our sense of cosmic loneliness, and our extension of that loneliness out onto the prolifically alive world around us. We forget about the power of dream and the sensitivity to the rich inner life of all the living beings around us. I think the Jatakas are a pathway back into this for all of us. So they're not just children's stories at all. Though maybe children's stories would be a good way to sensitize ourselves to the same territory. Anyway, it's only after this strange encounter that the king begins to reveal something of his deeper potential. He will now, after having this visitation by this kind of burning presence of the tree, will not simply accept even a divinity's words, but must personally confirm their truth or falsity for himself. In this, he establishes the foundation for lasting change. Here's where the king's innate wisdom begins to appear. Rather than simply doing what he's been told, reacting in fear to some kind of supernatural warning, he insists on a personal experience of truth. It is the beginning of wisdom. A further clue to the king's potential lies in the fact that each year he makes offerings to the Tinduka tree. This little bit of faith in something greater than himself, something beyond himself. This tiny crack in his ego shell is the doorway through which bodhisattvic wisdom can enter. Small acts of faith can have large consequences. Tiny acts of faith can have huge consequences over time. And the Bodhisattva just doesn't set things in motion, then disappear saying, hey, I did my Bodhisattva job, now it's up to him. No, he follows through. Commitment is proof he means business. A Zen saying says, when you kill, make sure you see the blood. The violence is not to be taken literally. It's simply a dramatic device to make the point stick. It'll stick in your mind, having heard that. When you kill, make sure you see the blood. What it means is, if you're going to do something, do it all the way. Do it with all you've got. Do it with a whole heart. Don't be tentative. As the consciousness of a tree, deeply rooted in the earth, vastly open to stars and moon and sun and wind and rain, to bugs and birds, beasts and human beings, the Bodhisattva actualizes Bodhisattva vows. Even as a tree, he models how to do good, avoid evil, and save the many beings. And so he creates a template for all followers of the Buddha way, even today. If the aspiration is deep enough, this story tells us that even when stuck in one spot, even when isolated and socially distanced, it's possible to help liberate all living beings. Creativity comes into play here. Saving beings is a bodhisattva's art form. Perhaps trees really are bodhisattvas, all of them. Yet how often do we think of them simply as pleasing decorations or mere ornaments? Yes, let's move that apple tree over there to look better. An old linden tree, a huge black walnut, several red buds, and a river birch surround our house. I am deeply grateful for their presence, for their selflessly green aspirations that every day improve all our lives. I can't imagine our neighborhood without these trees and the life they bring to it. Now, once the great Zhao Chu, that's Chinese, you might know him as Joshu. Once the great Zhao Chu was asked, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? That is, what's the highest teaching of the Buddha Dharma? The one that made Bodhidharma at an advanced age and at the risk of his own life travel from India to China to share. Zhao Chu said, the oak tree in the front garden. Did he mean that Bodhidharma was so compassionate he came even for the sake of the tree? Did he mean a tree is Buddha? Hardly. Zhao Chu's lips, it said, flashed light, offering no concepts, nothing secondary at all, nothing to cling to or build a comfy nest on. His words come in under the radar, presenting truth directly. The oak tree in the front garden. That's it. That's it. A final point before we close. Did you know that in English, the words tree and true, the words tree and true have the same etymological root, the same linguistic root, tree and true. Isn't that wonderful? A seed of insight is surely buried right there. How might we, that is, each one of us, help it not just to grow, but to flourish and become all that it might be capable of? So we'll stop here with the talk itself, and I'll look forward to seeing if there might be any questions, issues, stuff we might talk about, or anybody might like to bring up. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you to officiate this. So thanks.
Well, first, I want to say that your Dharma talks like yours, and yours make me want to stand up and cheer. It's not very common, but it's my impulse. Yes. So thank you, and tears along the way of just the tears of truth.
Thank you. Thank you. Really a pleasure to be with you. Plus, you forced me to really think about this Jataka and think about what I wanted to say about it. So I'm grateful to you.
Well, there you go. It's mutual. It always is. And I did find years ago, someplace along the way, the common root of tree and true and true, and that Buddha sits like a tree. We sit like a so.
Yes.
Go trees. And the whole world. I have some other thoughts. I had lots of other thoughts.
Good. Well, I'll
be quiet for a minute and see what others want to say. Okay. So I think because there's, if you could raise, like with Deborah, I can see with your hand up, and others, I think some of us know how to do the hand raised icon. So we'll just, there's a few pages on my screen, so I might miss you. If you see somebody I don't see, you could let us know that too. But Deborah, go for it, please.
Hi, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi, Rafe.
Hi, Deborah.
That was a gem. And the one thing that really struck me was that I'm going to not get it perfect, but the teaching is about creating the conditions for insight.
Yes.
Because you can't make people take on their lives. You can't make, the world shift in a big teaching. But I love that, creating the conditions for insight. That's really what Kapleau was doing. That's what you're doing. And hopefully that's what I'm doing by mentoring my writing students.
Yeah, I think that's what all good teaching comes down to, that you create the context in which insight has the potential to arise and come to the front burner rather than sitting on the back burner. So I think that's what it comes down to.
I remember I'll just say one quick thing. I remember the image during a sesshin with Kaplo that there was this at the end of the sesshin, the image of